Hi, everyone. Welcome to the All Things Amyloid podcast, where we feature patients, caregivers, and clinicians who discuss amyloidosis, a rare and incurable disease. Amyloidosis occurs when the body builds up abnormal amounts of misfolded amyloid protein, which can lead to serious and life threatening outcomes. I'm your host, Mackenzie, an amyloidosis patient and founder of Mackenzie's Mission. Our goal for this podcast is to raise awareness and share firsthand what it's like to live with this disease, to care for those affected by it, and to treat it. We hope this leads to earlier diagnosis and start of treatment, which will improve patient lives. Within the last decade, our amyloidosis community has gone from zero FDA approved treatments to multiple. This is indeed incredible. But what do all of these treatments do? In this episode, adapted from his video ATTR Amyloidosis Treatments, Stabilizers and Silencers, Dr. Brett Sperry, cardiologist and director of the Cardiac Amyloidosis Program at St. Luke's Mid-America Heart Institute, provides an excellent overview of FDA-approved ATTR amyloidosis treatments. He goes into detail about the biology behind silencers and stabilizers and exactly how they impair amyloidosis progression. In addition, he previews the future, summarizing new categories of drugs on the horizon.
Hi, my name is Brett Sperry. I'm a cardiologist at St. Luke's Mid-America Heart Institute in Kansas City, and I'm happy to be here speaking about ATTR amyloidosis treatments, stabilizers, and silencers. So, as you may know, there's two types of systemic amyloidosis, and I'll just get into the basics here for a second so that we understand what we're talking about when we say stabilizers and silencers. These are the two main FDA-approved type treatments that we have right now for ATTR amyloidosis. But first, just to give a background for everyone, there are two main types that affect the heart and that we are the most common here. One is AL amyloidosis, which is also called light chain amyloidosis. This is a problem in the bone marrow with overproduction of light chains, the small fragments of immunoglobulins. And these get overproduced by plasma cells, get released into the system, and then aggregate to form amyloid fibrils, leading to organ dysfunction. ATTR amyloidosis, again, is also called transthyretin amyloidosis. This is from the TTR molecule, this four-leaf clover-looking molecule that you see here, which is four individual monomers that are joined in the center here, and this helps to transport vitamin A or retinol binding protein, and thyroid hormone in our system. And this is a well-preserved protein, throughout species, so an important protein. But this can change shape and misfold and deposit into tissue, leading to amyloidosis as well. There are two forms of this. There's the wild type and the hereditary or variant or mutant form, where the DNA is, there's a point mutation here, which leads to a conformational change in the protein that can then be more likely to misfold. And we'll see when we're talking about different treatments why that is important there. There's other types of amyloidoses that are more rare, but me as a cardiologist and the director of our amyloidosis center here at St. Luke's focused mostly on the AL and the ATTR kind. So getting into the pathophysiology and the biology here, and again, this is important for when we're talking about drug development. This is the cascade of things that occur. So you have your DNA, which is up in the left here. This gets transcribed into messenger RNA and eventually translated into specific proteins. And in this case, the TTR protein, the TTR tetramer, comes together and looks like this. Again, we think of it like a four-leaf clover. Then when someone develops amyloidosis, that occurs because these individual monomers start to come apart and deposit as amyloid fibrils in various organs. And so, again, the genetic type is from a point mutation here in the DNA, which leads to a conformational change. We have different medications that work at different points of this pathway. The first one we'll talk about is stabilizers. These stabilize the TTR protein, the TTR tetramer, at the rate-limiting step to avoid this cascade of misfolding and then amyloidogenesis. And then we have silencers that work more upstream in the liver cell. This TTR protein is made in the liver to stop either the transcription or translation of the DNA and messenger RNA into the protein. So when we're saying stabilizers and silencers, this is what we're talking about here. And then finally, in the future, there are some drugs that are trying to be developed to look for fibril disruptors. This is when there's fibrils already existing in the organs, like the heart. How do we get rid of these? How do we move towards a cure for this disease to try to break up some of these amyloid proteins and deplete the amyloid stores that are found in the organs? So first, we'll talk about stabilizers, and there are two that have been tested in large multinational randomized controlled trials. These are named tafamidis and acoramidis. Tafamidis was tested in the ATTR ACT trial. This was published in 2018 and led to approval of the medication in 2019 for ATTR with cardiomyopathy. In this trial, there were 441 patients that were randomized and followed for 30 months. Medication worked really well. There was improved survival, improved heart failure health status, 6-minute walk distance, and then in all types of patients, they had improvement. Those who were more or less sick, those who were younger, older, men and women, all showed benefit. This was the first trial that was studied, first drug that was studied in ATTR amyloidosis. And so prior to this, patients didn't really have any treatment available. And so there was a big improvement in survival here that you'll see as the subsequent generation of drugs and studies come out, that we've done better and better job at reducing this gap in survival. So I'm going to tell a couple interesting stories in drug development here. I'm not a basic scientist, but I find this stuff very cool and interesting. So there's also a lecture in this series from Jeff Kelly, who probably talked about tafamidis and how this was developed. But there were many compounds here that were tested to see if they can stabilize the TTR protein, and eventually diflunisal was found. This is also called Dolabid, and this is commonly used now, like in creams, arthritic creams for the knees and joints. Dolabid cream people use, but this is an NSAID. There is a Dolabid diflunisal pill, but this is an NSAID. It has NSAID type side effects and properties. And so tafamidis was eventually developed as a non-NSAID TTR protein stabilizer. And they mimic the binding at the thyroxine binding site within the TTR protein. And so you can see how some of these three proteins are sort of similar here. So that's how, in summary, how tafamidis ended up getting developed. The second stabilizer here is acoramidis. This was a more contemporary trial than ATTR ACT with tafamidis. There were healthier patients included in this study. And patients were most commonly diagnosed non-invasively with imaging. Back in the early generation in the tafamidis ATTR ACT study, everyone in that study needed a heart biopsy to get into that study, which is a pretty high bar. Now we can diagnose patients a lot earlier with imaging. And so it lends itself to diagnosing patients earlier and having less sick patients to enroll in clinical trials. So this is a more contemporary cohort, 632 patients, again, followed for 30 months. And then again, there were improvements here in the endpoint of survival, frequency of CV hospitalization, 6-minute walk distance, and change in NT-proBNP. Again, all types of patients showed improvement. And there's expected FDA approval of this medication late in 2024 for ATTR with cardiomyopathy. And then the second cool story in drug development here is how this medicine came about. And this came about because of a super stabilizing variant that was found in this condition called T119M. And it was found to be protective in patients who should have otherwise gotten ATTR amyloidosis, like if they had this V30M gene mutation, which is a very bad mutation to have, where most patients end up developing either a severe neuropathy or cardiomyopathy in their early to middle years. Well, if you had this T119M mutation, then you didn't really get the problems. And so this was a super stabilizing mutation. And so this medication, acoramidis, which was originally called AG10, was developed to mimic the structural changes that occur in the TTR protein with these T119M mutations. So those are the stabilizers. Now we're going to talk about the gene silencers, and the two that are mainly used now and on the market. These work on the messenger RNA level to block the messenger RNA from getting translated and turning into the protein. And this is done in two fashions. One is a small interfering RNA, and one is an antisense oligonucleotide. And basically, they do similar type things with different mechanisms in order to block protein expression. And the medications that we have available for this, for the siRNA, we have patisiran, which was really the second generation, I guess, medication, and vutrisiran, which is a newer generation. We'll talk more about this in the coming slides. And then we have inotersen, which was the older generation, and eplontersen, which is a newer generation of this antisense oligonucleotide. So talking a little bit more about the silencers, eplontersen and vutrisiran, again, currently approved for polyneuropathy with ATTR. And these, it's approved this way because this is how it was tested first. There are cardiomyopathy trials ongoing, including the HELIOS-B trial, which read out at the ESC, European Society of Cardiology meeting in 2024 in cardiomyopathy. And so, but as of this moment, they're both approved for polyneuropathy. And you have to take these medications with vitamin A because, as I spoke about earlier, TTR is a transporter for vitamin A. And so if you reduce the level of this protein in your body, then there, in theory, could be a reduction in vitamin A transport to tissues. And so you want to take extra supplementation of vitamin A on a daily basis at the recommended daily units. So HELIOS-B was the trial here that we're talking about in ATTR-CM. This is a contemporary trial of healthier patients in both the ATTR ACT and Attruby-CM trials. There were 655 patients randomized in this trial, followed for 36 months, and it showed a lower risk of death and CV events compared with placebo, and it lowered the decline in 6-minute walk distance and in KCCQ. And so this is a real win for patients here with the silencers showing positive data for ATTR-CM. And then the other silencer here, eplontersen, this is being tested in the CardioTransform trial in cardiomyopathy, and this is ongoing with results expected in 2025. So to summarize the current generations of treatments, again, we have stabilizers, which is tafamidis, 61 milligram. This is a oral capsule once per day. Then you have acoramidis, which is 800 milligrams twice per day medication. And then a silencer, which is the two silencers, eplontersen, 45 milligram subcutaneous injection once a month. This is self-administered, so the patient gives this to themselves at home. And then the vutrisiran we talked about is 25 milligrams subcutaneous injection once every 3 months. And this should say in a healthcare facility that's given by a healthcare provider. So in the last couple of minutes here, I'll talk about some investigational treatments for ATTR cardiac amyloidosis on top of stabilizers and silencers. And the first are medications to remove amyloid. Again, we call these depleters. And there's AT02, there's ALXN2220, and NNC6019. These are infusion medications that are given monthly or more frequently than that in order to try to remove amyloid from the organs, really from any area of the body. So these are ongoing in clinical trials right now or soon to be ongoing. And then you have another medication called NTLA-2001, and this works at the transcription level this is a CRISPR-Cas9 medication to one-time lifetime treatment here to really remove the area where the TTR gene is in the liver cells, and then put the two ends back together to create a missense area so that this messenger RNA doesn't even get made in the first place. And again, this is NTLA 2001. This is also in clinical trial. And here's just my last slide looking at an overview of the current and future trials that are ongoing in ATTR CM. Again, this NTLA is a CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing medication. This is a phase 3 trial. And again, it's a single lifetime infusion for people to really knock down their production of the protein by 90% or more. There's maybe a future trial next year on an even newer version of the small interfering RNAs. This one is ALN-TTR-SC04, and it could even be given every 6 months or even every 12 months, depending upon how things go in a phase 3 trial, is being considered for next year. Fibril depleters. We mentioned these two of these are all going to be in phase 3 trials in various stages of completion. These all just started. And then we have a prevention trial as well that's starting here with acoramidis. This is expected late in 2024, a phase 4 trial that should enroll patients who have the genetic predisposition for amyloidosis with one of these gene mutations. And they're close to the age where they may be developing the cardiac disease or the neuropathy disease, but they don't yet have the clinical manifestations of disease. And this would be using acoramidis to prevent disease from occurring in the organs in the first place. And so really exciting time in amyloidosis. We have stabilizers and silencers, which are the FDA-approved medications right now, but we have more in that world, as well as the future world of removing amyloid from the organs coming up here, as well as prevention. And so that's all I had. Thank you again for having me, and hopefully you could learn something from this. Thanks.
It's wonderful for patients that there are treatments available today, with even more under evaluation in the clinical trial pipeline. Being able to slow or even stop the progression of disease, thereby extending and improving quality of life, is indeed game changing. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you'd like to watch Dr. Sperry's video, please visit Mackenzie's Mission Education Hub at mm713.org. Thank you for listening to the All Things Amyloid podcast. If you find our podcast informative, please follow and share it with others. If you want to learn more about the work we're doing at Mackenzie's Mission, please visit mm713.org. We'd also like to thank AstraZeneca Pharmaceuticals, Alexion Pharmaceuticals, Alnylam Pharmaceuticals, and Bridge Biopharma for their sponsorship to help raise awareness about amyloidosis. We hope you stay tuned for future episode drops. Thanks for listening.